Envision this scenario. A man stands in a suburban driveway, meticulously loading his minivan with soccer gear, school lunches, and car seats. His acquaintances observe him, thinking, "What a dependable fellow. What an excellent father. What a truly complete individual." Arthur Schopenhauer, the prominent philosopher of pessimism, would label this man a fool. Why? Is it due to a lack of affection for children? No. It's because he fails to grasp the true nature of existence. If offspring were brought into being solely through logical reasoning, would humanity endure? Schopenhauer's emphatic response was negative. This is the core issue with having children. You don't cultivate joy, you generate suffering. You don't establish a family, you construct a prison. You don't become a man, you become enslaved. And if you perceive having children as your life's purpose, Schopenhauer has a message for you. Wander through any children's play area, any school pickup line, any family gathering, and you'll spot them. Men who have mistaken biological urges for conscious decisions, obligation for genuine desire, societal conditioning for an intrinsic calling. They handle midnight diaper changes and categorize it as love. They labor extra hours to finance childcare and label it responsibility. They forfeit their aspirations for their children's requirements and term it maturity. And they believe this path brings them fulfillment. However, Schopenhauer held a differing view. The drive to exist is the origin of all suffering, and procreation serves as its most insidious snare. These men are victims of what Schopenhauer dubbed the most elaborate deception in human experience. They imagine they opted to have children, when in actuality, biology made that choice for them. Here's what they overlook. Each observer of this domestic tableau is engaged in an assessment. The astute ones discern the confinement, the wise ones perceive the fetters, the enlightened ones simply disengage. Why? Because Schopenhauer posited a truth about human nature that most men never comprehend. We don't commend overt sacrifice, we pity it. We don't admire voluntary servitude, we question it. We don't envy the overburdened, we actively avoid becoming like them. This fundamental misunderstanding leads to a critical primary error. The family man mistakes his burdens for his life's aim. He makes commitments his happiness cannot sustain. He initiates a conflict against his own best interests that he cannot possibly win. Schopenhauer's dictum on this was clear. Life is inherently suffering, and to create life is to amplify suffering. Yet the contemporary father habitually transgresses this principle. He introduces awareness into a world of pain, brings forth beings destined for disillusionment, and transforms his own existence into a mechanism for extending wretchedness. And when reality inevitably strikes, it strikes forcefully. All affection is rooted in sexual impulse, however subtly it may manifest. Here lies the revelation that devastates most men who become fathers. You didn't consciously select this life. Rather, you were enticed into it. That moment of falling in love, getting swept up in romance, or discussing a shared future, you weren't making rational choices. You were being manipulated by what Schopenhauer termed the species' cunning stratagem for its perpetuation. Schopenhauer grasped this perfectly. Nature achieves its goals through artifice. Love is the illusion that compels individuals to serve the species. The man operates on emotion, not on philosophical principles. He gets engulfed in romantic fantasies and neglects to pose the crucial questions. Do I genuinely desire the obligations of parenthood? Am I equipped for the financial and emotional tolls? Have I considered what I will relinquish for this decision? Is this choice grounded in reason or merely biological imperative? And here's what he only discovers when it's too late. Every romantic entanglement represents a philosophical choice where only your liberty stands to be lost. In the best-case scenario, you cherish your children but lament your forsaken opportunities. In the worst case, you resent your children and regret your squandered life. For this is the grim truth about the procreative urge. It has no concern for your well-being. It disregards your aspirations. It proceeds stealthily, strikes precisely, and vanishes before you comprehend you've been ensnared. The individual possessing genuine insight avoids romantic illusions. They don't require procreation to demonstrate their affection. They don't need offspring to affirm their partnership. They don't need to be a parent to feel complete as a human being. And this is where having children becomes truly perilous. You sacrifice your authentic self for a role that society applauds, but philosophy disavows. A man can truly be himself only when he is solitary. And if he shuns solitude, he will not cherish freedom, for it is only in isolation that he is genuinely unbound. Schopenhauer understood that autonomy and parenthood are fundamentally incompatible. The instant you assume responsibility for another consciousness, you cease to be entirely accountable to yourself. But the contemporary father takes the opposite path. He takes on the responsibility for individuals who will deplete his resources, demand his presence, and monopolize his time for many decades. He ensures that solitude becomes a bygone concept, freedom a distant memory, and genuine personal preference an elusive dream. And this is the consequence of perpetually taking on responsibility. You draw the attention of a cosmos that sees you as a resource to be tapped, not out of affection, that's the romantic illusion, but through the systematic extraction of your precious time, finances, energy, and opportunities. The father transforms into the focal point of unending demands. His progeny require sustenance, shelter, attire, education, recreation, emotional sustenance, and constant oversight. His spouse desires partnership, attentiveness, acknowledgement, and a shared burden of domestic chores. Society expects him to function as provider, protector, exemplar, and taxpayer. Meanwhile, he believes he's succeeding because others laud him as responsible. He fails to grasp that he has been systematically divested of everything that once defined his individuality. Schopenhauer termed this the quote, "The inability to perceive that ostensible purpose frequently conceals true servitude, that apparent significance often masks genuine emptiness, and that societal approval frequently precedes individual ruin." In a world characterized by boundless demands and finite resources, every parental obligation morphs into a shackle. Each school event transforms into a duty. Every family holiday becomes an expensive obligation. Each bedtime story subtracts time from your own contemplation. And everyone becomes reliant on you once you render yourself indispensable. Individuals who might have been equals evolve into burdens. Relationships that could have been voluntary now become mandatory. Choices that were once open are now predetermined. This encapsulates what Schopenhauer meant by the quote, "When your contentment is held captive by the needs of others, when your tranquility hinges on the satisfaction of others, when your freedom serves as the security of others." And the solution is never what the father anticipates. A man's pleasure derived from anticipating and hoping for a specific gratification is a part of the joy experienced in advance. However, this is subsequently subtracted, for the more we yearn for something, the less delight we find in it when it arrives. Here's the devastating truth about having children that impacts one's life. The promise of a legacy is philosophy's cruelest jest. You imagine you are creating something that will outlive you, honor your memory, and perpetuate your values. But what you are actually doing is generating more suffering veiled as continuity, because a legacy built on consciousness is built on shifting sands. Your children will not recall you as you wish to be remembered. They will not carry forth your aspirations. They will pursue their own. They will not appreciate your sacrifices. They will take them for granted or outright resent them. Schopenhauer brilliantly articulated this. Yet the father operates under the opposing fallacy that reproduction fosters enduring meaning rather than a transient diversion from meaninglessness. Observe what transpires with men who anchor their identity in their offspring. The accomplished businessman becomes merely, his achievements recede in importance compared to his paternal role. His identity becomes beholden to beings who did not request to be born and who may not even like him when they reach maturity. The presumption that children will provide meaning is the reversal of philosophical truth. True meaning stems from what you generate, not what you procreate. Authenticity and legacy originates from concepts, not genetic material. Genuine immortality arises from contributions to human comprehension, not contributions to human population. And here's why this holds practical significance. Your children will forge their own lives. They will depart, establish their own families, and pursue their own interests. The intense period of direct parenting lasts roughly 18 years. The period of living with your choices endures your entire life. So you exchange decades of autonomy for decades of obligation, in the hope of cultivating relationships that may or may not endure your children's independence. Meanwhile, the man who opted for philosophical development over biological reproduction has dedicated those same decades to mastering skills, creating art, building enterprises, exploring concepts, and cultivating wisdom. Which life embodies more authentic meaning? The man who spent 20 years changing diapers, or the man who spent 20 years impacting the world? All satisfaction, or what is commonly termed happiness, is truly and fundamentally always negative only, and never positive. Schopenhauer recognized that what we perceive as the joy of parenthood is merely the alleviation of the anxiety of childlessness, an anxiety that society artificially manufactures and then presents children as the remedy. However, here's the economic reality that shatters the parenting fantasy. Children do not complete you financially. They systematically deplete your resources, not just financially, but in terms of prospects, adaptability, and choices. The father believes he is investing in his family's future, but in reality, he is leveraging his present for an ambiguous return that might never materialize. An individual's existence is truly a tragic affair, yet when examined in detail, it often takes on a comedic quality. Consider the humor inherent in financial planning for children. You project university expenses that will escalate faster than your ability to save. You allocate funds for healthcare costs that will exceed your forecasts. You arrange for activities and chances that will stretch beyond your financial capacity. During this time, the man without children invests the same capital in appreciating assets, owns skills that boost his earning potential, and maintains the agility to seize opportunities demanding swift decisions. Who possesses more genuine security after 2 decades? The economic subjugation, however, extends beyond mere monetary aspects. Children introduce what economists refer to as path dependency. Each decision constrains subsequent options. Relocating to a new city becomes difficult due to school district considerations. Drastically altering one's career is challenging due to the need for stable income. Taking entrepreneurial risks is hindered by dependence requiring security. The childless individual retains what Schopenhauer valued most: optionality. This includes the freedom to alter one's course when new information emerges, the capacity to pursue opportunities as they arise, and the choice to prioritize experiences over obligations. This isn't selfishness, it's philosophical consistency. If life is about deliberate choices rather than biological programming, then preserving choice becomes a moral imperative. All volition stems from absence, from inadequacy, and thus from suffering. Here lies Schopenhauer's most profound realization. Every conscious being you bring into existence inherits the fundamental structure of existence, which is suffering interspersed with brief moments of contentment. You are not bestowing the gift of life, you are imposing the burden of consciousness. Reflect on what you are actually doing when you have children. You are creating beings who will experience physical pain and ailment, emotional disappointment and heartbreak, existential dread regarding death and meaninglessness, social rejection and professional failure, the gradual decline of aging, and inevitable mortality. It would be preferable if nothing existed. Since there is more suffering than joy on earth, every gratification is merely fleeting, generating new desires or new troubles. And the torment of the consumed animal invariably outweighs the pleasure of the devourer. Yet, Somehow, we have convinced ourselves that generating more consciousness is virtuous rather than cruel. The father gazes at his slumbering child and feels love, failing to recognize that he is guaranteed this innocent being will one day experience profound suffering, heartbreak, failure, loss, and death simply by virtue of being conscious. And here is the philosophical query that undermines the justification for parenting. If presented with the option of never existing or living a life containing both pleasure and pain, which would you rationally select? You cannot ask the unborn, but you can honestly reflect on your own experiences. How much of your life has been genuine contentment versus various forms of dissatisfaction, worry, and suffering? Schopenhauer's argument isn't that life lacks pleasure, it's that the pleasures do not justify the pains, and creating new beings guarantees both. The enlightened individual understands that not creating consciousness is an act of compassion, not selfishness. You are sparing potential beings from guaranteed suffering. You are refusing to amplify the world's pain. You are choosing wisdom over biological impulse. This is why the great philosophical traditions, Buddhism, Stoicism, various forms of asceticism, all recognized procreation as philosophically problematic. They comprehended what modern culture has forgotten. The creation of consciousness is the creation of suffering. A man can perform his duties, but he cannot dictate his will. Schopenhauer recognized that most of our desires are not truly our own. They are instilled by societal forces that benefit from our choices, even when we do not. Nowhere is this more evident than with the societal pressure to have children. From birth, society conditions you to view parenthood as an inevitable fate, rather than an optional choice. You receive toy trucks and are told you will be a provider someday. You see cinematic heroes who fight for their families. You constantly hear messages about continuing the family name. However, this conditioning serves society's interests, not your own. Society requires workers, taxpayers, consumers, and soldiers. It needs individuals willing to sacrifice personal fulfillment for social stability. It needs individuals who will prioritize group continuity over individual development. The masses are merely poorly executed replicas. The individual who chooses to have offspring simply because it aligns with societal norms isn't engaging in profound philosophical thought. Rather, they are merely fulfilling a societal script. They are essentially replicating preceding generations instead of embodying a unique expression of their own inner being. Arthur Schopenhauer recognized a crucial aspect of conforming to societal expectations. It hinders genuine insight. When one follows the crowd, one typically achieves results similar to the crowd's. A life of quiet desperation, camouflaged as ordinary duties. A truly philosophical individual scrutinizes fundamental assumptions. They ponder, why should I propagate? What personal advantages does parenthood offer me? How does having children contribute to my genuine growth? What would I pursue in life if I completely disregarded societal expectations? Such inquiries perturb most people because they expose the superficiality underlying societal conditioning. They reveal how much of what we deem natural is in fact a manufactured consensus designed to serve systems indifferent to individual flourishing. The discerning person understands that societal demands and philosophical truth frequently diverge. Society anticipates you will have children because it requires future participants. Philosophy, conversely, suggests avoiding procreation because sentience inherently involves suffering. Society asserts that parenthood brings fulfillment. Philosophy unveils that true satisfaction stems from wisdom, not from reproduction. Society promises that children imbue life with purpose. Philosophy demonstrates that meaning arises from comprehension, not from fostering dependence. Opt for philosophy over sociology. Embrace consciousness over conformity. Prioritize your own authentic growth above society's reproductive mandates. The truly wise individual comprehends their own nature and the nature of the world. A man who understands himself doesn't require children to validate his existence. A man who understands the world doesn't wish to introduce new consciousness into it. Here's a transformative perspective. When you cease to view parenthood as an obligation and start perceiving it as a choice, you become more authentic, not less. More fulfilled, not less. More wise, not less. Genuine fulfillment doesn't need to propagate itself. It manifests in your endeavors, emerges in your relationships, and becomes evident in your understanding. People perceive authentic fulfillment in the same way they discern true wisdom, not because you verbalize it, but because they experience it through their interactions with you. Not because you validate it through procreation, but because you exemplify it through the depth of your being. Schopenhauer recognized a fundamental truth about enduring contentment. It is never about increasing consciousness, but rather about refining the consciousness one already possesses. At times, one must concentrate on one's work. At other times, nurturing relationships is key. On occasion, one must seek understanding. Yet, a parent often has a singular focus: their children. Consequently, every issue appears to necessitate a family discussion. Every decision seems to impact the children. Every opportunity feels as though it must be assessed for its implications on parental duties. A philosophically inclined individual cultivates multiple focuses: personal growth when appropriate, intellectual pursuits when meaningful, creative expression when inspired, and spiritual comprehension when called. This multifaceted approach is the source of their genuine wisdom, not because they are self-centered, but because they are comprehensive. Not because they evade responsibility, but because they accept it deliberately. Not because they reject love, but because they do not conflate love with biological compulsion. They have assimilated Schopenhauer's profound lesson. Wisdom involves understanding reality, not merely perpetuating it. Fulfillment stems from developed consciousness, not multiplied consciousness. Authentic meaning emanates from philosophical insight, not biological output. Therefore, perhaps the pertinent question isn't, "How can I be a good parent?" but rather, "How can I cultivate authentic wisdom?" Or, "How can I profoundly understand existence?" Or, "How can I live governed by reason rather than instinct?" The most astute action one can take isn't to become a better parent. It is to cultivate greater consciousness, deeper inquiry, increased philosophical sophistication, and a stronger inclination to favor reason over reproduction. For when one becomes someone who comprehends life rather than simply perpetuating it, someone who cultivates wisdom rather than creates dependence, someone who engages in profound thought rather than automatic procreation, that is, when the sensation of authentic existence is discovered. And it requires no children whatsoever. Indeed, it demands the opposite: the fortitude to choose consciousness over biology, wisdom over conformity, and philosophical development over reproductive conditioning. The presumption that children are indispensable for a meaningful life stands as philosophy's greatest adversary. Schopenhauer grasped a truth that many men are only beginning to comprehend. The choice to procreate is the most paramount decision you'll never deliberately undertake unless you approach it with intentionality. For countless ages, men functioned as biological machines, impelled by romantic fantasies into procreative obligations that they never truly contemplated from a philosophical standpoint. This led to centuries of male hardship presented as satisfaction, fiscal bondage masked as duty, and philosophical unawareness portrayed as wisdom. However, we now inhabit an unparalleled era. For the inaugural time in human history, you possess absolute reproductive autonomy, financial liberation from familial constructs, societal acceptance for remaining childless, intellectual paradigms for comprehending these decisions, and the insights of profound thinkers like Schopenhauer to guide your path. The intellectual scrutiny overwhelmingly endorses Schopenhauer's somber findings. Raising children signifies the victory of biology over intellectual thought, instinct over reasoned awareness, social conditioning over unique self-expression. Opting against having children signifies a liberation from biological directives camouflaged as affection, averting the amplification of hardship presented as purpose, safeguarding genuine liberty veiled as egocentricity, and upholding intellectual coherence disguised as a child-free existence. Schopenhauer's ultimate inquiry resonates with every contemplative individual. Would a person not rather feel such empathy for future generations as to shield them from the burden of life? The response is affirmative. And that precisely elucidates why refraining from having children is the most sagacious course of action. Conversely, the opposite represents the most imprudent.